everyone. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. We're on a little side quest right now to take a look at all the Best Picture nominees from the calendar year 2022. Today we're talking about Nightmare Alley. My name, of course, is Timo, and I'm joined by Tucker, Tanner, and Abram. We four make up the Backlog Boys. And right now, for the next 2 months or so, we are trying to figure out what the very best Picture nominees are. And so today, with Guillermo del Toro's latest film, Nightmare Alley, starring, Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette, pretty star-studded cast, we are going to be talking about...
Second only to Don't Look Up.
Truly, in the Oscar contenders this year. I cannot wait to hear what you guys think about it, because I have some thoughts about it, as I do most of the time. Maybe not all the time. But a little tiny, eensy bit of housekeeping before we dive into this film, because I want you to keep this in mind. There's one other film on our list. I'm doing some mentalist stuff right now. I'm reading.
Oh, mentalism.
I'm reading Abram. Abram, I see you have a green picture in your background.
Oh. Wow. This is great for audio listeners.
quite the read from Timo Nelson there.
Last week we talked about The Power of the Dog, and it got a score of 8.7. So will Nightmare Alley measure up, or will it fall short? That's what we're here to figure out. And I think enough ado about all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about the movie. Who wants to go first with a maybe little plot synopsis?
A plot synopsis? Sure, off the top of my dome, I could prepare a plot synopsis.
Okay.
Because this story follows one Stanton Carlyle, played by Bradley Cooper, as he is roped into the shenanigans of a carnival in the 1930s to 40s, around there. Actually, I think, 1941, I think, is when it starts.
World War II era, yes.
Yeah. No one knows when that happened. And as he's roped into this, he starts to learn that he really enjoys being a mentalist, deceiving people, using their histories and their thoughts against them to eke money out of them, do whatever. And him and the woman who becomes his partner, Molly, go off. They start doing this show, and eventually he comes into cahoots with Cate Blanchett's character, Lilith Ritter, a psychologist who he's able to sort of team up with to take on bigger and bigger claims to people with power that he can eke even larger amounts of money out of. But this doesn't quite end up as he was so hoping, and it kind of spirals downwards and downwards and downwards as he gets too stuck up in his own power and starts drinking heavily, and then the movie ends up in a pretty dark place, and that's where it ends.
Stanton Carlyle is all about eekin' and geekin' in this movie.
Eekin' and geekin'. That's the tagline of Nightmare Alley, I think.
It's basically the Great Ziegfeld, but like pulpy and sad.
Oh, I see. Well, Tucker gave us only a plot synopsis there. Tucker, what are your thoughts on Nightmare Alley? You thought you could escape.
I'm never going to escape.
Never escape your opinion on this show. That's what it's all about.
That's certainly the point. I actually watched Nightmare Alley less than a week ago. I think almost exactly a week ago, because I was wholeheartedly convinced that I was not going to be nominated for Best Picture, and I could watch it now and not have to rewatch it for Quest because it was not going to be nominated for Best Picture. And guess what? Surprise of the fucking day, Nightmare Alley nominated for Best Picture. Honestly, on no one's radar that this was even going to be a possibility. Didn't do too great at the box office. It received surprisingly middling reception for the next Guillermo del Toro movie, but it slid in under the wire. It's probably the number 10 slot. But on a second watch, I actually found a lot more to appreciate about this film, and it is easily in the top of my favorite Best Picture nominees of this season. I think that the performances and the score and the production design and the story and the ways that all the characters flow together in this sort of dark and nasty world, I find to be really compelling, and there's just a ton of memorable moments, and I think it's really high quality all around.
Okay, there we go. Who dares follow that up?
Yeah, no one. We're done.
Step right up, Tanner.
Ooh,
Tell me your
right
opinions.
All right. Now, I watched this movie for the first time. This is also my second time watching it. I watched it back in 2021, if we can cast our minds back. In December, when this came out in theaters. I also prepared for it by watching the original 1947 film, Nightmare Alley. This is a remake, though GDT says it's more of a adaptation, a closer adaptation of the book than a remake of the 47 film, and I tend to agree. The 47 film, spoilers for that, and I guess for the end of this movie, but you've probably watched it already, or you don't care. Stanton Carlisle comes back at the end, and he is the geek that he once cornered and caught in Willem Dafoe's Carnival. But in the 47 film, it ends with him almost becoming a geek, and then Molly using her womanly charms on him to bring him out of his stupor, and then it's a happy ending because it's 1947. We can't have our main character become a wild man that eats chicken heads or whatever. But this, I think Guillermo del Toro is a lot more adept at capturing that dark noir tone that I think the source material, the novel, had. And I thought 2021's Nightmare Alley is a good movie. I think the cast do a good job. I think the production, there's a certain elements that stick out above everything else. I think the production design is certainly one of those. I also like the score of this. But across the board, I think it's good. I think it's maybe a little overly long. This movie's 2.5 hours.
Doesn't need that long.
Yeah, it does not need to be that long. I'm a little wishy-washy on Bradley Cooper in this movie. I liked him a little more on the rewatch, but still not my favorite. But yeah, there's a lot of elements that I feel good about and mixed on. I'm sure we'll talk about.
Okay. Abram, should you go or should I go? I'm going to leave it up to you. You get to decide right now. Who goes next?
I want you to go next.
Okay, I'll go next. I like this movie. I had a great time watching this film, actually. I found it to be very engrossing. And to me, the film, to me, it was like watching a movie that was made in the 40s, except it was made now. It felt like a 40s film with all of the grand modern technological advancements that we've seen in filmmaking. And so I'm kind of absorbed in this golden age of Hollywood in my studies right now. And to me, that was like showing itself in the way that GDT made the film. And so I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh, I love the world of this film. And so that brought me through a lot of the film. I think it's got its slow moments. I think it is too long, but I'm me. Look, inspect the movie posters behind me. I like long movies, so that's not necessarily like a huge detriment in my book. I had a great time.
Mm-hmm. Hey,
all right, let me put some asterisks on this.
Okay, here we go.
First asterisk, I also enjoy a long movie. I watched Dune 3 times last year, and I'm also a big fan of Blade Runner 2049, among other films such as Lawrence of Arabia. You might have heard of it if you know Timo Nelson or watched his program. I also... And I think that's probably the biggest asterisk on my enjoyment. Let's say it this way: I don't like Nightmare Alley very much at all. And I think one pillar of that is certainly my personal dislike for GDT's style. I'm not averse to a little bit of gore. I like to watch the Raid films. I like to see somebody's throat get sliced with a broken fluorescent lighting tube. I don't mind it. But there's something about the way that GDT juxtaposes like this kind of like warm color palette and sort of like this feeling of nostalgia against this really harsh gore that I find to be very off-putting. So I find that, especially when we get to the end, like in Shape of Water, when the plot happens in the last 15 minutes and everybody's getting the noses broken off and ears shot to shit and just all of that, like, to me it's that stuff that already is taking me out of the film. But that's very personal.
Sure.
But I also just don't really think Nightmare Alley is that compelling, but by its own merit. I think this movie is too long, and I think it is poorly paced. And I think that it forgets a lot of what made me so compelled by the film in the first place, which is the amazing cast of actors and characters in Willem Dafoe's circus, who basically go away for the entire runtime of the film. And narratively, yes, we come back to it. We see Ron Perlman come back. We get these characters for a moment. But I think that it loses a lot of what's kind of weird and cool and harrowing and potentially super interesting about that first half an hour, 45 minutes, when it just becomes a con artist narrative with maybe the characters I care the least about from the opening act of the film. So I was not a fan of Nightmare Alley.
Here's the thing. I agree to a certain extent. I think what this film does very well, in my opinion, obviously not well, in your opinion, is take two surprisingly disparate and very unique halves of stories that are obviously connected, obviously contain characters that have, an arc between the two of them, but place them next to one another in sort of a juxtaposition that I think allows them both to be heightened. I think that they are both very unique, but because of that, equally compelling. The way that you are set up in this world in the first half and have that stripped away from the characters because of this decision that Stan has made, I think makes that second half feel really dark and lonesome, and you realize the impact that his choice to maybe kill Pete, and that's a little bit unclear, take the book, lean into the mentalism, lean into the deception, and alienate essentially everyone around him, even the woman that he clearly was passionate about at the beginning. I think it is meant to be lonely and disrupting and really dark, weird tones that lead you into the end where obviously he's very alone and he has pushed everyone away and he has become the thing that he hated at the beginning. There's a very deliberateness there that I think really actually works for the themes and the character arcs and the tone of the movie. That juxtaposition is used very well. It is also, they are very different. So I can see you're in the mood of that first half. The carnies are there, the carnival aesthetic. Oh my God, the sets are amazing. You're getting used to this dynamic, and it is ripped away. I don't think it's not set up that that's going to happen, because of course they're going to leave, but I can understand that being jarring enough to disrupt you in the second half. But personally, I found it to be a nice balance that ends up lifting up both halves of the film.
I think the film was kind of billed pretty hard on the carnival aspect, and it was billed on a lot of these carnival characters. And I didn't see a huge amount of the press that was surrounding it all. And so when we move away from that, I'm like, okay, well, this is just where the film is going, as opposed to me feeling like, oh, like I did really like it, everything that was happening in the carnival, but I'm like, we have moved in a different direction and the film is gone somewhere else. And I can't believe I'm going to say this because this is not how I watch films, but this movie was all about the characters. I really cared about the characters in this film. Unlike most of the times that I'm watching films. So to me,
Timo hates people.
I do. Bradley Cooper's character was pulling me through the film the whole time, and I found myself like, oh, he is like X. He is a con
He's
artist.
like me.
And I idolize him.
And so I'm like thinking about how his character, and I'm like, oh, he's in this new situation. Oh, like how is he acting now? And so that was what kept the through line between the beginning and end, because I got to see the evolution of this man, basically, which is
the de-evolution of this man. Is he man or beast, Timo? That is the question.
Man or beast?
Is he something gone wrong in the maternal womb?
I just want to note, by the way, to that point what you're saying with the marketing, like Power of the Dog, I had no idea what this movie was about before I started it.
Okay,
so that was also not my issue here. It's not an expectations issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tanner, you doing that? Do you have something to say? Because I
was going to bounce off of the impressions that we were both doing and talk about. I think
that's what I was going to do too.
Comparatively, I do prefer the first half because we get some bigger characters like who we were just doing. Willem Dafoe as Clem, the carnival, the head of the carnival, the ringmaster, I guess you might call him. Willem Dafoe is fantastic. I think Abram was live messaging his watch of this and said Willem Dafoe is one of the greatest actors of our era, and I wholeheartedly agree. He just gives 110% in everything that he's in, and that includes Nightmare Alley. You know, he's walking around with Stan. He's like, "Yeah, you know what a geek is, boy? Let me tell you about this geek while he eats some steak and eggs. Oh, that's baby Enoch over there. He killed his mother during childbirth, and he laid around for a few days, mewling like a calf. I keep him in a jar." And I think I don't blame Abram for really attaching to that first half because, quite honestly, I think that is the more engaging half of the movie. You have a whole wide array of characters. You have the interesting set design. You have the police coming in to raid the carnival and like try to bust things up. And Stan Carla is like, "Oh, I'm going to use my my mentalist tricks that I learned from Pete to sort of get this guy off our tail." Great scene. Very correct, Tucker. But when you get into the second half, very correct, Tucker. Thanks for raising that point. But when you get into the second half, Kate Blanchett is good. I think that she sort of matches Bradley Cooper's energy in a lot of ways because Bradley Cooper is understated, especially when you compare him to like a Willem Dafoe or a
Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman, thank you. I was gonna say Hellboy. Or anybody, or even the Major. I don't know the actor's name for the Major, but he's also great. Or even Pete and Xena are also great characters in that first half. But when you get Cate Blanchett, she sort of matches his sort of deceiving energy. She's like, all right, I'm on the level with you. I know what you're doing, and I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm hustling these rich folks for cash is basically what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
And you don't get that fun dynamic as much. It is much more about, I think Abram brought that, it's much more about a con man narrative. Which I liked both halves, but I can understand why you might be less connected to the second half.
I think my problem with it is actually exactly what you said, Tanner, is that we lose the dynamics, and the dynamics what made that first half for me, because I think that Bradley Cooper is the least interesting character in the entire movie. And the reason I feel that is because we know from the opening scenes of the floor of the film when he puts his father's corpse on the floor and sets the house on fire that he is not a good man. No. And he is a man of deception, right? And I think that what was interesting and challenging about that first half is the way that his sort of burgeoning deception skills lead him to manipulate or reframe his relationships with those people in the amusement park. And they're very colorful characters that he's bouncing off of. Then we get to the second half, and now he's doing higher stakes stuff, but I kind of already feel like I know him, and we get more out of those expository but still pretty well acted therapy scenes. But still, it's him bouncing off of Cate Blanchett, which I think is okay. She gives a very pulpy and fun performance. Or it's Giles from Shape of Water, who is totally fine.
Richard Jenkins as Ezra Grindle. Just let that name roll off your fucking tongue. What a top tier character name.
But the thing is, I don't think he feels like a top tier character. He's got sort of an interesting backstory that we start to get with how he either sliced up or had someone else slice up Cate Blanchett. I think there's stuff there, but it all feels muted to where Bradley Cooper is, especially because I don't feel that Molly is that much more than just like somebody in the background. It feels like he has nobody to work off in that second half of the movie.
Rooney Mara is very underserved in this movie, especially as Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett becomes his female co-star, but as the character that Bradley Cooper brought with him from the carnival, very underserved.
Yeah, I think there's some story. You were talking about the isolation, like story thematic reasoning in there, but I can see why, as like just a enjoyment of performance and that kind of stuff, why it's desired that it. What am I trying to say? That you missed having her in this later part of the film.
She can still be a character and have a very little screen time, but I didn't feel like her character had a lot of material to it. And not time to find that material either.
Yeah, so I think Timo and I are kind of on the same page here with our enjoyment of Stanton Carlyle, Bradley Cooper's character, in that a lot of my reading of the film, especially on the second viewing, I was not really a huge fan of him on my first viewing, but now viewing the film through his eyes and knowing where he goes and better understanding, okay, he's got this like seed in the back of his mind that he is able to grow into being super deceptive and manipulative and not caring about anyone. It's interesting to see this character that has that ability in the background go from ostensibly a silent character at the very beginning of the film for like the first 15 minutes or so.
He does. Bradley Cooper does not have a line for the first 11 minutes and 19 seconds of the film.
Exactly. From a silent character to a sort of confused and understated character who's just getting used to the dynamic of this world, but then he quickly gravitates to this carny lifestyle. He gravitates towards Pete and Xena and the fact that they are hustling people, and you can see like the spark light in his eyes as he suddenly realizes, this is what I like to do, and I want to get into this, and I this woman that I am really passionate about, I want to take her with me. I want to take ourselves out into the world and show them what we can do. And make some money off of it, make a lot of money off of it. And that power just grows and grows and grows to the point where he becomes an inversion of what he was at the beginning of the film. And I think his descent is what this film is hinged around. And if you don't connect to that and you don't connect to him, which I completely understand because I didn't the first time, then I think the movie kind of falls apart in its progression. But for me, watching Stan and Molly's relationship go from passionate and heartfelt, dancing on the merry-go-round and kissing in the tent and these kind of things and driving off together in the sunset. Cut to 2 years later, they're a little bit rocky, and he starts to suddenly lean really heavily into the mentalism, lean into the deception, do the spook shows as everyone's telling him not to do, and finally become the warning that Pete was saying, no, don't open this book. It's not good for your fucking health. And he just drops off a cliff, becomes completely isolated. And I find that progression of his character to be really fascinating, especially the way that it completely reframes everyone around him and like his thought process and all of that.
So what you're saying, Tucker, is essentially it's a miracle that I connected to this character, because if I didn't, I would have hated the movie.
I guess so. I don't know. I still thought it was good the first time I watched it, but I wasn't like in love with him. You know, the aesthetic, the music, the supporting cast, the general concept I was enjoying, but I do think a lot of the goal of this film is for you to really appreciate and connect to Stanton Carlisle's descent into madness.
I think hearing you talk about his character, Tucker, I think my issue is just that, like, I don't really buy Bradley Cooper in this role as, like, this man corrupted by greed and deception and stuff like that. Like, the film tells me that the character is, and I believe him, but I believe the film that the character is, but I just can't buy Bradley Cooper in that. He's not versatile enough in this film, I don't think, to sort of hit that arc for me. Because if it is an arc, like you say, I don't think he changes his performance in a lot of ways. And if he is a bad guy from the beginning, it's just like this low hum that he operates at. And I think Bradley Cooper's good in the movie. I don't have any knocks against his performance. It just didn't bloom for me. Didn't break out of whatever shell he started in. Like, he doesn't have a line for the first 10, 11 minutes, like I said. And when he has that first line versus, like, maybe, well, actually, you do get, when you get hobo Bradley Cooper, that's about as close as you get to a transformation for Stanton Carlisle.
Very good transformation.
Yeah, but otherwise, he's largely the same, I feel. And yeah, I mean, I do like some of these seeds that they plant for him. If I can about why he delves deeper into it, and he does the spook shows, like you said. And I didn't pick up on those the first time I watched the film. Like, his mother ran away with a preacher and abandoned him and his father at home in wherever they live, and that's sort of why he doesn't take Pete's warnings of, like, oh, you don't do this to good God-fearing people or whatever, because he just has this, like, disdain for religion, presumably, and he views his father himself as, like, this coward who didn't fight for the woman that he loves, and that's why he, like, is continually obsessed with, like, one-upping himself and not fading into mediocrity and stuff like that. I think these are good seeds for the character, but I don't think Bradley Cooper really grabbed the reins of them and did something interesting in his performance.
I don't think Bradley Cooper is an especially powerful actor to begin with, which I don't think really helps me connect to him. But I also don't think he did a bad job.
It's great when you can't see his voice or can't see his face, and he's voicing a raccoon in space.
But I think he does a good enough job. I think that he actually really sold me in two key scenes. The first, which I think is the best scene in the film, when he stops the police from arresting Molly.
Yeah.
I think he's excellent there, and I also think he's really good when he's confronted for the first time by Cate Blanchett when he's giving his show in that nice ritzy hotel. But I think my problem is that I don't think the script gives him enough to do that sells the character arc. Because I agree with Tanner, I didn't really buy his transformation. I think that in the second half of the film, the movie becomes so focused on plot that it leaves behind a sense of organic progression for the character. Because I think another thing that's really interesting about that first half of the movie is how they do a nice job of setting the seeds for that moment when Bradley Cooper stops the police. We see him fingers to the head, practicing and learning little things from Xena, and he's picking up these details. We learn that he's kind of he's good with his hands. He's good at making a show. He understands theatrics when he's setting stuff up with Molly. But then I think that all becomes backgrounded, and you're just supposed to accept in your heart of hearts that now Bradley Cooper can just do whatever the fuck he wants. We don't actually see him ever get challenged until Molly makes a mistake with Ezra in the garden. It just sort of feels like the movie becomes so concerned with, okay, but now he's going after a bigger score and a bigger score, that we forget to do things like establish that Bradley Cooper is all about the money. He says it's to Cate Blanchett. It's all about the money for him. But we never see him spending that money in a way that he becomes intrinsically tied to that lifestyle. When we see hobo Bradley Cooper, I don't necessarily immediately feel that like he is less happy with his material status in that life than when he was in headlining shows in the city. Because what does he do with the money? We don't see. He orders some room service. Okay. But we don't see him fall in love with that life the way you might see in a Goodfellas or something. I think that the narrative of a man on his downfall is pretty common. But it requires establishing the places and the characters around him which show him becoming more and more enamored with the life that he's faking before losing it. And I don't think we ever see that life in a way that compels me for when he loses it to really feel anything other than the plot demands that this happens now.
One other scene that I, because we said that we like the him tricking the sheriff rolling up to the carnival. Another scene that I like, and I wish we had gotten more of this type of character moment throughout the film, is the lie detector scene. I think that's a great scene because it's really, I think that's where Stanton, Bradley Cooper, really doubles down and like he's like, all right, I'm all in on this thing right here. But like, you get that in his character, but his behavior doesn't exactly change from before that point to after that point. I still think it's a great scene when he's like, oh shit, how do I get out of this? I'm flubbing this lie detector test because I am lying. I can't actually read people's minds. Yeah. He's like, there's a woman there, and he uses the background information that he got from Cate Blanchett, Dr. Ritter, to sort of give Richard Jenkins, I forget what his character's name.
Ezra Grendel.
Ezra.
And don't you forget it.
I'm sorry. He gives Ezra a reading like right there in the lie detector, and that endears him to Ezra. Ezra's like, well, there's something wrong with the lie detector test. There's no way he could have known that my wife had brown hair or whatever. I think that's a good scene, and it shows Stanton thinking on his feet. I just think, we needed some more elements like that to flush out his character a bit more that weren't him sitting on a couch and like sort of mumblecoring back and forth to Cate Blanchett.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about what his goals are. And you're right that it is established that he's going after money. He has these lofty goals, and it's not really shown, but I think that's actually because, and at least my reading of the character now, thinking through his progression and his role in the film in this world, is he's only after money because being richer, being more famous allows him to reach more people and feel a greater sense of power. His real draw is not being rich and buying a lot of things. It's being powerful, being able to corrupt people, being able to easily deceive them. If he has money, he can easily buy people off to get information, to deceive more people, to grow his influence, grow his power up. From square one, when he realizes that Pete has this ability to trick people by using their sort of inner demons against them and like blanket statements of you loved them but you hated them, and people are like, oh, that's so true. Like you can see it in his eyes that what he's after is power, is people believing in him, because he as a character was so like in his childhood, which we're told about and not shown about, which I think could have been handled a little better. We're told that he was pretty lonely as a child, like he had his art, but his mom left him, like all these things. He wants recognition. He wants power. And the money thing, again, as I was saying, I think is more that when he's rich, people will believe him more. He can get into high quality establishments. When he doesn't have money, it's not that he's not happy with his material life. It's that no one's going to fucking believe him anymore. He is a hobo on the street. If he goes up to someone and says, I can read your mind, they're like, no, get away from me. I like, what the hell are you doing? But there's an element of class and power dynamic in there that I think is intrinsic to his character that I think is a little bit deeper than just, I want to be rich and spend money on a lot of things.
There's the line earlier where, what's his name? How do you say his last name?
David Strathairn.
Strathairn says like, well, like the spook shows, don't do them. You will start to believe yourself. You will start to believe that you have this power that you don't. And to me, that was where I was reading his character going like he is so in. He's so in on this. He never turns back. In the lie detector scene, he keeps going, and then he gets another chance to turn back. The film gives him these opportunities to stop, and he never does. And he chooses to keep going forward. Tanner.
I wish that we had gotten a thing of like he starts to buy into his own lie. I don't think we ever get that though, because as he says, it's always about the money for him. It's always he always knows that he's pulling a scam. And yeah, we have that setup at the beginning where David sits there and says, yeah, if you do too many of these, you'll start to believe that in this power that you supposedly have that you actually don't. And I wish that we had gotten that. I think that would have been an avenue for some bigger, more interesting stuff from Bradley Cooper. But we don't, and it ends at a con man sort of thing, the downfall of a con man. And
Sure.
it doesn't have to be literally that he thinks like, oh my god, I have magical powers, but he
Right.
can like be lost in his power a bit more than just, oh, I want to get all this money and stuff like that. Not just to spend it, just to have it, and have that class. I wish we did have more of that. He's buying into his own lie. And that's what I thought the lie detector test scene was going to be. I thought that was going to be a turning point, but it wasn't. And it left me a little disappointed, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with Tanner because Tucker, I really like your reading of his character, but I just don't think that me personally as a viewer had any sequences that demonstrated that to me beyond these sort of lines of dialogue that you were talking about, that Timo was talking about, because I agree, Tanner. I thought that the perfect opportunity in that lie detector scene is that the lie detector test was kind of inconclusive. When they ask him, are you a medium? And he says yes. It looks like that could be a positive or negative, right?
Yeah.
Or you do the thing of, again, it comes back to establishing the place around him. If after he worked with the judge, he got a favor from the judge and he gets like prime real estate and now people are coming to him and they look up to him. But it's not. It's all very private and interpersonal and weaselly, and it's about that $10,000 we're going to get per session on the way to the seance, right? I never got the sense that there was praise for him. We didn't ever see headlines of he's in town, he's going to do the thing. I never felt like Bradley Cooper was actually getting any kind of recognition that would give him the sort of visibility that he was talking about back with Molly. And instead, when everything begins to unravel, the moment of where Bradley Cooper's character breaks is when he looks through the money and it's ones. Both through visual storytelling and through the script, I think it's established that he's in it for the money. And the assertion there for me in the sort of subtextual level is that he's building out of his class and he's going to be something more than he was. But we don't see that, and I also don't think we ever see him gain a recognition either falsely in the community or sort of falsely within himself that he is a medium. We just see a man who wants money and is privately scamming and conniving people to get bigger and bigger paychecks.
So I want to go down a little different angle because I think, Abram, you talked about the private aspect, and I'm going to go on the crazy train right now. If you want to join me or not, you can. To me,
I've got my ticket, but I haven't decided if I want to get on yet.
the second half of this film is about therapy. I think the entire film builds to this idea that Bradley Cooper, that Stan, is essentially a therapist for these people in a unwitting and a misguided way. He straddles this line between a therapist and a preacher. And when he goes and sees Cate Blanchett's character, and so I started developing this thesis as I was watching it, and it made me like her side of the story a lot, in that I was reading, okay, what is therapy? You know, we're in this time where it's not really common for people to go to therapy. It's certainly not common for men to go to therapy. What is that doing in the story? What is, like, he's in sessions. He like literally goes to therapy in the film. And then he like replicates it. And I see him like doing this kind of, it's not magic what he's doing, and he's just using knowledge that was gained in therapy to sort of further this, he tries to like bring resolve to Ezra's life. He tries to like get him to repent. And so to me, like, there's this dual, like, yes, he's a con man, but then as like a thematic material, it's more about like what zero therapy does to a motherfucker, because that's what happens at the end. He doesn't like accept like what the good almost in what he's doing could, letting people learn about themselves, what therapy does. And ultimately it's not necessarily that is the cause of his downfall, but that, to me at least, played a part in it. So, it's maybe a totally harebrained idea, but if old Guillermo sees this, hit me up and let's talk about how your movie's really about mental health.
Timo, I really like that idea, but I don't agree with it, and I want to explain why. Because from the sequence of events that I watched, it feels like, if anything, this is a message about don't go to therapy because they're lying to you and they're going to ask for a lot of money in return. Because ultimately, the end result of him going to the district judge is that his wife kills him and then kills herself. Like, if the message is that
That's what some therapy does to a motherfucker.
See, my problem now, as somebody who has gone to many different therapists and found all of them equally unhelpful, I personally don't hate the idea of the thematic message here being these therapists are lying to you. But that seems like a very cynical reading for this Best Picture nominated film. But I think that there's sort of incongruity here where the sort of helpful things like, oh, I'm here to help their marriage, was more just a facade towards the money, because we basically get a cut from we're helping the marriage to they are just killed themselves. So it just feels like a discontinuity there for me.
There definitely is something in what Timo is saying. I think that
maybe
both right,
let's
actually.
work through it. Maybe Stan is a bad therapist, but there's a foil somewhat in Cate Blanchett's character. She is a bad therapist, but not in the same way. He tells people to do bad stuff, or he puts these ideas into their minds that they have to do bad things. Whereas Cate Blanchett's character is like she records all the conversations. Dubious, I will say, that's dubious as a therapist.
Don't do that. If you're a therapist out there, hey, stop it.
And
maybe the rules were different in literally 1940.
And she sells the information, but the actual like therapy that is plot related, is therapy. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I think what I got out of my second viewing of this film and sort of thinking about the mentalist aspect of the film and the therapy and the psychology aspect of the film is that there is this intertwined nature of lies and deception, but also revealing the truth out of things. And I think that's one of the stronger underpinnings of the entire story is how people react to therapy, how they react to lies being fed to them. If they believe it, then it can be good or bad. The outcome of it is almost not really a factor of how it's being handed to them. But then there's also this obvious theme of what bad therapy can do and bad therapists. And I think that it is a dark and whatever the word you used was, Abram, cynical, a dark and cynical theme. But I think it's an interesting way to tie the carnival storyline of, deceiving people for 25 cents or whatever, and then afterward, that scene where Xena has to lie, and then the woman thinks that actually her brother's there, and she's like, she has to go to her and like, no, sorry, it was a trick. Like there's a tie between that kind of deception and mentalism to the actual psychologist, wacko that she is, but actual psychologist at the end that like pulls all the way through. And I think it's a really fascinating way to think about the way the human mind works.
Tanner's about to jump out of his chair if he doesn't get the chance to speak.
No. This is a casual question, and I might be an idiot for asking this, but bad questions. Why does Cate Blanchett betray Stan at the end?
Because the sex was really good. They fucked, and it was amazing sex. That's probably what happened in behind closed doors.
Excuse me.
Why does anything
have a better reason?
No, why does anything happen in a noir movie? Why do the two characters in Double Indemnity like get together and do this murder together? It's because the sex was good. No, like literally they totally bang, and
I agree. We don't see it, but I think that is true. But I think you're reading slightly too much into that for that to be the reason.
But I'm looking like for an actual plot reason. Why does she backstab him?
Well, I think the whole point of her character and her dynamic with Bradley Cooper is that she is even like stronger mentalist, or even stronger deceiver.
Why did they have a mind battle at the end?
No, but the idea of the fact that she is so good at her job and so good at deception that she is deceiving the deceiver. And obviously,
Gotcha.
she's a bad person as well.
She's working it from the beginning, is what you're saying.
100%.
Okay,
100%.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And the scene where she says, no, I love you. And then he turns around and is like, what'd you say? And she's like, get fucked, pussy. You fell for my trick.
You fell for a pussy fart.
and then just absolutely destroys him and breaks his ear with a gun in a very
breaks his ear.
am I wrong? But I do
She's
think that
busted, for sure.
that's the intention of her character, is that she's even more deceptive. Like, he's not at the top of his ladder. In his mind, he thinks he's the best of the best, but there's someone who can even deceive him.
I was just asking if I had missed a note where she's like working with somebody or something like that, but she's just out for her own gain and she's better than him.
See, I don't like this though. This is another point where the movie annoyed me, because I agree that that's definitely what it is. The whole line about, you notice that my clutch didn't look heavy this time, bitch, before she shoots him in the air is pretty
Bang,
clearly
bang, bang, bang.
It's very clearly a, you got me, so now I'm gonna slowly get you back. And I think that on sort of like an interpersonal level, that's almost so petty that I find it to be compelling. But my problem is, I think
So
there's
petty that you shoot someone in the head.
there's a much more interesting motivation for her to have, which is, what's his name? Ezra Bridger,
Ezra Grindle.
Ezra Grindle, the crime where she's trying to atone for the crimes of Grindelwald, and she's trying to get. She put it this way: she's been cut down the chest by this man.
Correct.
She, in this society, does not have the power to enact that revenge. She now has the opportunity to lead Bradley Cooper down that path to get the revenge for her. That's not really that's really not the point of her deception. But that is a much more interesting and a much more biting reason for her to betray him, more than just I'm smarter than you, right?
Sure. No, I don't disagree with that.
In the context of 1940s society, I have no power. You are this man who comes in who thinks you have everything above me, but you don't. And I'm going to use you to not only get revenge on this man who mutilated me, but then for you to get your life ruined as a result. I think you could have the deception that's in the film and a deception that makes the plot a lot stronger.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. I think that neither of those two angles are super explicitly thrown out in the film. I think what Tucker was talking about, what Tucker and Tanner were talking about, are a little bit more like concrete in the film. But given that it is a little amorphous, maybe there's room to read it as you please.
Sure.
I don't think there is. What I'm saying is that that's what the movie should have done.
Yeah, no, he was hoping for that.
Yeah, I'm projecting something that would have been more interesting.
Tanner?
Tanner, what the fuck do you want?
Second is Timo used the word amorphous. So second question about the film. We really gauging you guys on what you thought happened, because this is another point in the film that can be interpreted in multiple ways. Did Stan purposefully kill Pete? Yes or no?
I meant to rewind and look what color he took. I meant to go look for it. I never did though.
He took the sugarcane bottle. We paused and rewound and we're like, okay, that's the same kind of thing that Willem was sipping from earlier.
But they were stored right. I mean, okay, yeah. I don't know.
It was the same kind of the bottle was the same kind of bottle that Willem Dafoe swigs out of. But do we ever see a close up of like the wood alcohol bottle?
He places it down next to Pete. Go look at that shot.
There is the scene where we see what the bottles, which bottle is which, where they come from. And I guess you were saying that you looked back at it and the bottle came from the right bin, right? It came from the blue one?
You can't tell the color because it's
nighttime.
It's nighttime. But the type of bottle, the shape of bottle is the kind that Willem Dafoe drinks out of when we get that established.
I thought they looked the same.
What I'm asking is
sure
that the same kind of bottle that the wood alcohol is in?
I thought they were different shapes, but I also could be wrong.
I don't know.
But I think that's a part of the ambiguous nature of, is he doing this maliciously or not? When I watched this film the first time, and kind of a little bit the second time, I thought that he was doing this he was getting the alcohol because Pete wants it and he wants to be on Pete's good side, so he teaches him more and he can become a better mentalist. That's how I read it. I didn't read it as him maliciously giving him alcohol to poison him and so he dies. But that's obviously what happened, and the ambiguity of it, I think, is maybe an issue. I don't know if it really particularly matters which way you land, because regardless, he's not a great person. Regardless, he did have a reasonably good relationship with Pete. Like, each way it leans, there's a reason why you might want it to be that way. But I find both equally compelling, so frankly, I don't really care which way it actually goes.
Sure.
What did y'all think of the...
Largely irrelevant to the plot, I have to say, because we already know that he's a bad person. So, like, if he killed Pete on purpose or doesn't kill Pete on purpose, the outcome's kind of the same. Because then we learn retroactively that he kills his father just because he hated him. So, like, To
He
me,
loved him, but he hated him.
it's really neither here nor there. I think if he killed Pete or not.
What do y'all take of going back to Kate Blanchett in the later half of the film? That scene right before she shoots him, where she's like trying to like totally unravel and scramble his brain and like claim that it was all like in his head and like all this things that he's making up.
She gaslights him to the nth degree. Yeah, sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. We never met outside of this room.
Okay,
I think it's totally fine, but I think that's actually what I was talking about, which I think is, now that I remember it, a little more clearly in the text of the film, her being deceiving the deceiver. Like, that is the ultimate moment of her, like, breaking him down and be like, yeah, I have power over you. You know, maybe not socially, but mentally, I know how you tick, and I'm going to use that against you to break you down so I can ultimately, you know, prove my hierarchy, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What about I want to run through the wins. Well, not the wins. I always say that the noms for this film a second to see if that spurs any further conversation. This film is of course nominated for Best Picture. It is also nominated for only 3 other nominations, low, because this was again a surprise inclusion in the Best Picture category. Also nominated for production design, very well deserved. Costume design, also very well deserved.
It's a period piece.
And cinematography. So, any thoughts on any of those elements, or any further elements that we haven't talked about?
To me, all of those elements, the cinematography, the set design, and the costumes, mesh together into create this 1940s vibe. The atmosphere of the film is just unescapable to me. I think he actually improves upon Shape of Water in the set design. I think he goes the step farther. There, like the place that we first meet Ezra at is this like insane Art Deco building out in the middle of nowhere, and it's got these huge. It's like
he's sitting on a chair in the middle of a gigantic hallway just by himself, but it totally exists to be like intimidating and like show off this ridiculous set.
And so what all of that does to me is it's a total callback. It's kind. For a ye oldie film enjoyer like myself, it's kind of like all 3 Spider-Men showing up in a new film, because they I'm like, I see how they're totally inspired by these 1940s noir films. The noir of this film is palpable, and not in like we are taking this like it's, you know, gritty kind of modern times, maybe 70s kind of noir. Like, no, we're doing 40s noir, but with modern techniques and modern abilities. And that is something that I feel like I haven't seen before, and is something, it's a genre that I really like, and it's also really, really well executed in the film. And so that's pretty much what was pulling me through. I think there's a lot of slow moments in the film, but all of that was just like keeping me going, because I'm like, oh, wow, cool set. Okay, nice, dope pants, man. They're huge. They're like 1940s like balloon pants. I love these. So I think those are very well-deserved nominations, and I would be totally unsurprised if it wins at least set design. That one, I think, it's just, I don't know, it feels so lifelike to me in how it's constructed.
Yeah. I also really dig the production design. I don't know how you can't like it, honestly. I mean, starting out in the carnival, you have these giant, you know, they feel period accurate, where like he's going through the fun house, if you can call it that. That's more of like a atone for your sins house.
Yeah, and there's like great. Yeah, what is he trying to say by putting all that on there?
The wall full of eyes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
spinning tunnel,
or even like Molly's like new electric chair setup is great.
Oh my God.
There is that woman who is a spider, who her head is just on a spider. By the way, bit of trivia, that she is played by Giada Colagrande, Willem Dafoe's wife.
Oh,
good for her. But I think, honestly, I compliment the story. I like the characters a lot, but obviously they can be taken different ways. They can be a little bit confusing. There's adaptations and confusions that can lead you down different paths. But I think really the strongest element of this film, and frankly why I think what sets it apart from other Best Picture winners and why it is added on that list of Best Picture nominees, or I meant to say nominees earlier, but is its aesthetic. I think the way that the set design, the color palette, the lighting, all these things flowed together to make this aesthetic that is frankly unlike anything we've seen, except for maybe Shape of Water to a certain extent, is insanely impressive to me. And it's the detail and in this carnival set. Like, this isn't just a couple tents. No, this is a whole like village of tents with wooden walkways on the floor and these hand painted signs that's like Bruno the Strong Man and come see the fat guy. Like all these things that create this aesthetic with light coming from these strings of lights hanging above and flags waving in the wind and dark yellows and reds that are juxtaposed against the browns and the grays and the blues. It's like a really rich aesthetic that I think absolutely pulls everything together. And even when you get to the second half, when there's less of that carnival aesthetic, but more imposing Art Deco buildings and like rooms with weird things on the ceilings, and their hotel room has like this bed with a big mold on the walls and the ceiling that like pops out, and it's got this depth to it. I think depth and nuance is really the name of the game when it comes to this film's aesthetic.
I was just asking one more thing I want to shout out. One of my favorite locations of the film is the snow-covered hedge maze or whatever, where the final action sequence takes place when Bradley Cooper punches that guy's nose clean off and then runs over the other guy. Extremely brutal and extremely cool looking set and shot very well. I think it deserves that cinematography nomination as well.
We just needed an insert shot to Jack Nicholson with an axe.
I know.
Complete.
I wanted Stanton Carlisle to be in the snow.
I like the production design. I don't think it's nearly as remarkable as Shape of Water. I kind of like if Shape of Water's production design is Goodfellas, this is Casino. Like it's still really good,
sure.
But you set the bar so high before that. Like I feel the sort of carnival aesthetic is beautifully rendered, but also like. I think the real world carnival we see on the boardwalk in Us or in Good Time is equally as effective to me. Sure. I think what was so amazing about A Shape of Water is the way that aesthetic felt so fresh and like it could not be replicated. But Art Deco is an architecture movement, and Batman the Animated Series nailed it like 30 years ago, right? And so while I think GDT did an amazing job, it's not as unique as I felt Shape of Water's was.
Yeah. I do have some final bits of trivia here, just a few, just to round us out here a second. It is mostly about how how this film stopped production because of COVID-19 and sort of the results of that. It actually worked out in a number of ways for the production of this film, because they actually filmed the most of the early scenes were filmed after production suspended for COVID-19. So they sort of shot this in reverse order. They did later scenes and then stopped production because of the pandemic and then did the early scenes. Bradley Cooper used that opportunity to lose 15 pounds, so he looked a little slimmer, a little younger in those earlier scenes.
There's a two-year time gap in the film. Yeah.
Rooney Mara was pregnant while they began filming, and obviously in those earlier scenes, she's sort of in her carnival get up where it's sort of like it's not quite like a bikini top and bottom, but it shows her midriff, which would be an issue if she were pregnant. So she gave birth during that production break, which ended up working out fairly well.
Guillermo del Toro forced her to give birth.
He's like. I talked about how the Giada Calagrande thing. One other thing that I found interesting, and I don't have time to go into all of this, but apparently GDT was interested in like mentalism and these like phony mind readers and stuff like that, because in 1998 his father was abducted in Mexico, and he was like and the police told him, the hostage negotiators told him, like, hey, by the way, there's probably going to be like a bunch of psychics or whatever that show up to your family's home to like con money out of your family to talk to your father. And he's like, I was like, these guys were assholes, obviously, and I like chased them out of my house, but also interesting, like these guys just like vultures go to these people who are suffering, and I think that comes across in the film quite very well also.
Yeah.
I want to throw one final thing in here while we pull up our score sheet to try to put some stuff in there. A thing that I learned about in one of them film classes I took is environmental filmmaking and the idea of bringing in like natural elements to the film. Basically having weather be a part of the film. And I think that this film works really well in that it's snowing. Like every time he looks at the carnival in like the beginning of the film, it like lightning strikes and it's it's kind of egregious, but like it's funny. And I'm like, okay, yeah, bad place. Every time we look at it, there's a,
It's just always overcast on that set.
and then when they're in the city, it's like snowing. It's like always snowing. And I just enjoy that. I think that is taking it a little step above because it's not easy to make movies when it's raining or when it's snowing or when you have to fake it like that. So props to the production team for making that happen because I think it just, I don't know, it adds to the essence of the film.
Yeah, the stormy aesthetic. It's always dark and overcast, and everyone's always damp.
It's
Everything
literally
is damp in
noir,
this
dude.
movie.
It's noir.
Yeah.
You gotta have these elements. All right, let's give this a score.
Let's do it.
I got ready to punch in mine. Are you guys ready?
Mine's in.
Three,
hang on.
two.
Okay, go for it.
Going. There we go. Whoa. Okay. Across the board,
This might be the largest gap we've ever had.
pretty wide swing with an average score of 7.6. The point breakdown. Well, average score of 7.6. It's going to go at number 2 on our list of the 2022 Best Picture nominees, below Power of the Dog. And the point breakdown. Starting, where should we start? Well, I'm just going to read it across. Tucker gave it an 8.6. Tanner gave it a 7.5. I gave it a 9.0, and Abram gave it a 5.1. So, wow, almost 4 points spread there. That's
Yeah.
pretty wide. I mean, we talked about it a lot during the review, but you wanna give any final points here?
It's a good movie. I like a lot of this stuff. It just didn't break into that upper echelon that I might expect from a Best Picture nominee. And it's certainly not the worst that we'll get to in this list. It's not even like the most all right that we'll get to on this list. It's just a good movie.
Yeah.
I think the movie is kind of pulpy and neat, but also sloppy. I really think that the pacing is a major issue that we all mentioned, but didn't really hone in on.
Oh yeah.
In addition, again, to my disconnect from his style, but I feel like most of my criticisms align along a character level, a script level, a pacing level. And it just really killed it for me, especially when we just watched Shape of Water, which I think is just a much stronger and much more interesting film than this is. So I think it is an okay movie. I think it's fine. It's middle of the road. If this was the Best Picture winner, I think that it would stack up right in the middle of my personal feelings on all the films we've seen. And now we're kind of reflective of what the Rotten Tomatoes is, because I think it's like 70 something
IMDb
percent.
and Rotten Tomatoes are sitting right at 70% right now. So
3 out of 4 critics, and we are the only 4 critics that matter in the post-Roger Ebert
Absolutely.
Siskel world. So
100%. I mean, I've got his femur right over there.
let's.
No, but I honestly, obviously disagree with you, and it reflects in our score, balancing out whatever. But I think this film is genuinely fantastic. It's not on the level of Shape of Water, and I'm not particularly disappointed by that because Shape of Water is one of my favorite Best Picture winners. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of my favorite aesthetics. But I think what this film does is take Guillermo del Toro's personal storytelling. Obviously, all the films we've talked about have tied personally some way back to his childhood, his life. It takes his personal story and his love for the dark and macabre and takes it away from pure fantasy. Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, these movies are based in there are wacky creatures which are not in the real world, but it places this dark aesthetic into real world history and allows you to sort of see a fantastical view of the past in a way that is very unique. I think the reason that I would obviously personally stray away from this being middle of the road or comparable in any way to almost any of the films that we've seen is there are no films today being made with this aesthetic. There are no films in this modern time period that lean into fantastical versions of real world past that take wet Art Deco lighting, like all these different elements that you just do not see in modern filmmaking. And obviously, that doesn't resonate with modern audiences. There's a reason this film flopped categorically at the box office and got middling scores from audiences and from critics. It's not appealing to a lot of people, and I totally understand that. But frankly, I found that very refreshing, and for that reason, I was kind of worried, like, okay, I'm not really excited to watch this, but watching it again with a critical lens, I think there's so much to enjoy here. Fantastic character, phenomenal performances, top of the line production design and lighting and score and all of this stuff. I think it really is quite a fantastic film.
I think GDT
Hollywood-
found his man with me because I like this movie a lot, and I think my score reflects it, and that's about it.
Hollywood, you heard the man. Chucker wants more wet movies, and he wants them now. God damn it!
Get rid of me!
Wet movies.
I'm
Now.
wet for wet!
Speaking
right.
of, one last thing that might be a little off color, but you guys remember when Bradley Cooper got a bathtub hand job in this?
Oh yeah.
Couldn't forget it.
God
What
damn
a
it.
what a picture!
A lot of fantastic scenes sprinkled in there in between some slower ones. What are we going to be doing next week? I'm curious. What are not next week? Next time. We're on a many times a week schedule right now for the quest for the bestest. What film are we going to be speaking about next?
We are diving further into the available on streaming oeuvre of Best Picture nominees, and we are going to when I said it's not the worst film that we'll talk about in this series, we're gonna get to it. It's Don't Look Up. We are talking about Don't Look Up next time on this side quest, a movie that we've all seen, correct?
I've seen it before.
And none of us enjoy, correct?
I can't wait to talk about it regardless.
Yeah.
Let's not frame this conversation too darkly.
One last thing, just for our audience. I know this is a common thing that we all believe in climate change. I'm going to speak for all of us. Climate change is an issue, but Adam McKay did not make a good film in Don't Look Up. We'll get to it next time.
Let's put it this way. Climate change is an issue. Adam McKay's Don't Look Up is a bigger issue.
Oh, I see. We need to solve Don't Look Up. We need to stop Adam McKay before we stop climate change.
One of those is probably easier to do, Frank.
Don't look up, maybe. But who knows? I mean, we could throw some curveballs in the review. You guys ought to.
Maybe I'll love it this time.
That'd be fun.
On a second viewing, it maybe will be greatly enhanced. Who's to say?
All I'm going to say is this, Timo. The
Okay.
audience better tune in next time because I'm going to have some location humor in the next episode. And the other people on this panel know why.
I do.
I see,
You
I
will
see.
just have to wait and see what that humor is. And until then, we'll catch you around. See you next time. Peace.